Would you like to be a gothic heroine? With a life full of danger and romance and obscure poetry and crumbling castles. Is that the life for you? Well, then this is your video. Today we're going to be talking about how to be a gothic romantic heroine in Jane Austen's day by analyzing her Northanger Abbey and its inspiration, The Mysteries of Udolpho. So if you would like to learn all about that, then definitely stay tuned for today's video. My name is Ellie Dashwood, and this is my channel where we talk about classic literature and history. So you may be familiar with the term Mysteries of Udolpho if you're a big Northanger Abbey fan. That is the book that Catherine Morland reads throughout the story. However, how much do you really know about the Mysteries of Udolpho? Well, good news, if you don't know much, I'm about to tell you. The Mysteries of Udolpho was published in 1794 when Jane Austen was 18 years old. And this thing was the mega best-selling hit of its time. Every young lady had to be reading The Mysteries of Udolpho. It was scandalous and dark, and there was gothic castles and evil uncles and drama. There was drama, baby. It was written by a woman called Anne Radcliffe who did specialize in writing gothic novels. She also wrote The Romance of the Forest that we hear Emma talking about how Mr. Martin doesn't read the serious literature. He doesn't read Anne Radcliffe. That's why Harriet should not marry Mr. Martin, clearly. Now, let's talk about the plot line of The Mysteries of Udolpho, and just a warning, I'm giving complete and total spoilers because honestly, do I think you're all going to run out and read it? No. One major reason is it's huge. This is how thick Pride and Prejudice is. This is it next to The Mysteries of Udolpho. This book is giant, and it's definitely not written in a way that a lot of modern readers would love, but we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. However, something really fascinating about the structure of Mysteries of Udolpho is that it was put out in 3 books, as books often were. Pride and Prejudice was put out in 2, just because that's how they published things in the day. But the way that the author structured The Mysteries of Udolpho is it was the original YA trilogy. Each book could stand on its own. Like a modern editor would have broken this thing up into 3 separate books, and it would have been a trilogy, and I just think that's fascinating. If you don't want all the spoilers, jump to this timestamp. Otherwise, here are the plot lines of the 3 books. So, book 1, we meet Emily. She's a young lady who lives in the south of France with her elderly father, and she is perfect. She loves to frolic through the green fields and write odes to caterpillars. She's the most loving daughter and most kind and gentle soul. And her father loves her so much, especially since her mother has passed away. She is all he has in the world. They live in the 1580s, which is about 200 years before this book is being written, so it's actually a historical fiction novel as well as a classic literature piece. Anyway, Emily, she's with her father, and you know what they decide to do? They decide to spice up their life. Instead of just living in their mansion and frolicking in the countryside, they're like, let us go on vacation. So they go on this scenic trip through the mountains, and while they're going through the mountains, guess who they run into? A young man named Valancourt, and he is also perfect. He can quote poetry at length, and when he sees a sunset, it moves him to his core. He's valiant, and of course, he has such great taste that the second he saw Emily, he knew she was outstanding. Anyway, he joins the father and daughter on their vacation. So they continue to go through the mountains, and then they start going through this forest. And honestly, this is when the book suddenly takes a turn for the creepy, because the forest seems creepy. So the father suddenly has a turn for the worse in his health because he's quite elderly, he's quite unwell, and he needs help. They try to go to this mansion that is very creepy, but no one is home. So then they go to the little village in the forest, and everyone's actually really, really nice there. However, they also let them know that the forest is haunted. Anyway, while in this village, the dad dies. And of course, Emily is super upset. Thankfully, there's conveniently a monastery also in this forest that she can go and cry with the nuns. So she goes to the monastery, she cries with the nuns, And then she has to go live with her aunt because she's still a minor and, she has to live somewhere. Book 2. So she goes and lives with her aunt. Is her aunt perfect? No. Her aunt is awful. She's selfish, vain. Nobody likes this aunt. And the aunt happens to be single, but lo and behold, she finds a husband, and her husband is creepy. He's very, very creepy. He's evil. He's 20 times worse than the aunt. And this uncle is like, we are moving to Italy, everyone. And Emily's like, but I love Valancourt. And the creepy uncle's like, no, I'm breaking off that engagement. We're going to Italy. So they go to Italy. So then they go to Venice. And Emily's quite sad about Valancourt. But also, Venice is beautiful. So beautiful and interestingly described that I think someone may have been having a drug trip while writing this part of the book. Anyway, Venice. While there, a guy falls in love with Emily, who's rich, and is like, marry me. And the aunt and uncle are like, you have to marry him. And of course, Emily's like, but Valancourt! She will not marry him. The uncle gets very mad. So much drama goes down. Ultimately, it's like, we're leaving Venice. We're going to go live in my castle. Because creepy uncle has a creepy castle called Udolpho. And Emily has no choice. She's taken by force to this castle in the mountains that's completely isolated in the most desolate place in the world. It's crumbling. And there's an entire horde of evil bandits that just now hang out with her uncle all day and night and cause her constant terror. So she's living in the creepy castle. So much drama goes down. There's strange sounds. There's a dead body. She goes into a room and there's just a dead body there. Drama, baby. Anyway, eventually the aunt dies, so she has nothing keeping her at the castle except for the fact that she's being held hostage. Thankfully, some servants come to her rescue and help her escape. And she goes back to France. Book 3. So in book 3, she goes back to France, and where does she happen to land? But in the very creepy wood with the monastery and the village and the mansion that was empty and no one could help them. Well, guess what? The people who live in the mansion came back to the mansion, and guess what? They just happen to be long-lost relatives of her. So she stays with them at this mansion. But guess what? Not only is the wood haunted, but the mansion itself is also haunted. Her main feeling, though, is, but Valancourt, also everybody has died. There's a dead body in the castle. She's just having an existential crisis, but guess what? Valancourt shows up. And then she learns that Valancourt's been up to unsavory behavior in Paris. Maybe he's not so perfect. Of course, Emily, who's perfect herself, is like, I can't marry this guy who's not perfect. I'm going to now mourn him too. But that is when we start learning that all the things that were reality may or may not have been reality. What is real? Because we discover that Valancourt actually is still perfect. It was all a bunch of misunderstanding. That the dead body in the castle was actually a wax figure made to look like a dead body. And that the haunted wood is not actually haunted. One of the nuns at the local monastery is insane and escapes at night and makes music in the forest. And that's why everyone thinks it's haunted. Meanwhile, the mansion she's staying in is also not haunted. It's pirates. There's a secret passageway up from the beach, and the pirates go up in it and hide their loot in one of the spare rooms. And so to keep everyone away from it, they make noise. Yeah. What is real? What is real? What is reality? That is one of the biggest, mainest questions being raised throughout the mysteries of Udolpho. Before we dive into that, here's a word about this video's sponsor, Brooklinen. After a long day, I love climbing into a bed that feels like an oasis of luxury, so I can reset and recharge. Brooklinen is a luxury sheet company that sells high-quality home essentials that really elevate my sleep experience. Their Lexatine sheets feel so buttery that I just melt into them at night. They put out limited edition seasonal colors, and I had to get this one in Blue Mist because look, it's so pretty. But their limited edition colors sell out fast, so you have to be on top of it. I love shopping on their website where you can mix and match different colors and sizes to create the perfect bedroom look for you. I matched the color Blue Mist with their classic window pane set just to really keep it like refreshing but classic. They're the most awarded brand in the bedding space, so you can really count on them to be your sleep expert, bringing you sheets that are not only aesthetically pleasing, but will also help you get your 7+ hours of sleep every night. They are having a sleep week sale with all items 20% off through March 20th. If you rely on Brooklinen for all of your sleep needs like I do, then I recommend getting their hardcore bundle. That'll save you up to 40% since it'll stack the bundle savings with the sale discount. Check out the link in the description below, and now it's time to go back to Gothic heroines. So as you can see, The Mysteries of Udolpho was quite the wild ride, and it seems to have had multiple effects on Jane Austen. Like I talk about in my video on how not to marry Mr. Wickham, Jane Austen was very interested in that question too, of what is real, how do you establish reality, the difference of perceptions and how things appear versus what they really are. That is a main theme in The Mysteries of Udolpho, and that is one that Jane Austen developed herself. But then in Northanger Abbey, we definitely have that theme. But I feel like there's a secondary one that Jane Austen's really examining. Jane Austen often is credited as sort of making fun of it in Northanger Abbey, but in reality, I think she was having a very intelligent conversation with it because she respected it. And she had a different viewpoint on something in life, and that was the main thing she was trying to get across in Northanger Abbey. And that is, what does it mean to be a heroine? So if we look at Emily, like I talked about before, she is perfect. She's considered like the perfect female heroine. Every young lady should be like her. Every young lady should live this life if they want to truly be the main character, right? And I think one of the first things Emily is she is aesthetic, like ultimate aesthetic dream girl right here. Like if she had an Instagram account, it would be the most insane thing on the planet. And a lot of this comes from the fact that The Mysteries of Udolpho is part of the Romanticism movement that wasn't so much interested in creating realism. Jane Austen was, of course, a huge realism person, but they were creating art. It was like, no, we need art and feeling and no logic. We need Venice to seem like a trip, okay? I would say that its most common aesthetics are ones that people are still really loving today. First off, Emily lives the cottagecore lifestyle to the extreme. Like if you want to know how to live cottagecore, go check out Emily's life. Then, after it starts turning very gothic, it's a very gothic lifestyle. And then it becomes sort of very like dark academia. Like it's so fascinating how the modern aesthetics that still people love today were the same thing that Emily was living back then. And throughout Northanger Abbey, we see Catherine Morland trying to recreate that aesthetic in her own life. She wants to get that dark academia vibe. For example, when they're going to go to Blaise Castle, she's very detailed. She's like, is it really a castle, an old castle? Are there towers and long galleries? And yet, no matter how hard Catherine tries, she just cannot get the aesthetic. Even when she goes to Northanger Abbey, she's disappointed. It says, to an imagination which had hoped for the smallest divisions and the heaviest stonework, for painted glass, dirt, and cobwebs, the difference was very distressing. And she's not the only one of Jane Austen's heroines who always want to sort of have this aesthetic and keep getting it crushed. For example, in Mansfield Park, when Fanny goes to look at the chapel at Mr. Rushworth's house, she says, I am disappointed. This is not my idea of a chapel. There's nothing awful here, nothing melancholy, nothing grand. Here are no aisles, no arches, no inscriptions, no banners cousins to be blown by the night wind of heaven. No sign that a Scottish monarch sleeps below. So both Fanny and Catherine are always wanting things to be like these novels. They're always comparing their own lives to the lives of these heroines, and they feel like they're coming up short. So the first step to becoming the perfect Gothic heroine is to have an aesthetic and then be able to achieve it. Now, Jane Austen's heroines often want the aesthetic. They compare their lives to those who have it, but they fail at actually achieving it themselves. Let's go on to point number 2, which is appreciate the picturesque. So in my video on things to know before reading Pride and Prejudice, I talk about the concept of the picturesque, which was a whole big topic where you had to understand what would make a beautiful picture. You had to understand whether painting the sunset was even worth your time. Is it picturesque? How can you tell? There was whole theories behind this. However, a good Gothic heroine understood what the picturesque was. They had the eye, so to say. In the Mysteries of Udolpho, we read, it was one of Emily's earliest pleasures to ramble among the scenes of nature. Nor was it in the soft and glowing landscape that she most delighted. She loved more the wild wood walks, the skirted mountain, and still more the mountain's stupendous recesses, where the silence and grandeur of solitude impressed a sacred awe upon her heart, and lifted her thoughts to the God of heaven and earth. That is how much Emily appreciates nature and understands what's really beautiful. Did you notice how it wasn't just the rambling green hills she thought was beautiful? It was the craggy mountains that were uneven. And that was part of the picturesque. There was definitely a preference for the asymmetrical, the wild, the sort of rugged nature, but that just is effortlessly chic. Now, one of the things that the picturesque lovers hated the most was artificiality, anything that looks like this was made to be pretty by humans. For example, perfectly laid out gardens. No, that was not picturesque. Or in Pride and Prejudice, when Elizabeth sees the stream that runs in front of Pemberley, she even notes that a stream of some natural importance was swelled into greater, but without any artificial appearance. So apparently the stream got bigger in front of Pemberley, but it didn't look like they did it on purpose. Now they may have done it on purpose, but does it look like they did it on purpose? No. The perfect heroine always understands the picturesque. And in Northanger Abbey, we see Catherine Morland trying her best. We have a whole scene where Henry Tilney decides to help her understand the concept, and she becomes a great proficient. So she ends up kind of meeting this requirement. The next requirement to be a Gothic heroine is to be emotional. You have to have all of the feels all the time, and they have to be the most strongest, overpowering emotions on the planet. And if you're sad, you cannot eat. If you're happy, no one has been happier than you in your entire life. This, my friends, is called sensibility. And yes, Marianne Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility is the poster child for this. But what's super fascinating about the ideal heroine is that she doesn't have to work at it. These emotions come to her naturally, where Marianne works at it. She's actively conscious of how her emotions should be, and she tries to behave that way. So, for example, when Willoughby first leaves her and she's supposed to be going to sleep, but she's just too upset about it, she consciously thinks about how she should be behaving. It says, she would have been ashamed to look her family in the face the next morning had she not risen from her bed in more need of repose than when she lay down in it. So here we see Marianne, instead of just reacting from a very natural place of if I sleep, I sleep. If I don't, whatever happens, she's I can't sleep because I have so many emotions, or I'm supposed to be having so many emotions. If I don't have this level of emotion, how can I face people tomorrow? And the book repeatedly talks about her emotions in this way. It says that it would have been very inexcusable for her to be emotionally calm enough to sleep, and that she considered possible composure under this situation a disgrace. And what's interesting is that these are also moral words, right? Shame, disgrace, inexcusable. She's making moral judgments off of what she thinks her emotions should be. She thinks that it would be morally wrong to not be this emotional. Meanwhile, we can contrast that with another heroine of Jane Austen that has a lot of sensibility, but very naturally and very organically, and that is Fanny. When Fanny finds out shocking news and then is supposed to sleep, this is how she reacts. It says, Fanny seemed to herself never to have been shocked before. There was no possibility of rest. The evening passed without a pause of misery. The night was totally sleepless. She passed only from feelings of sickness to shudderings of horror, and from hot fits of fever to cold. And Fanny's emotions are often described like this, like they are the natural outcome. Yes, they're very intense. She can't sleep at all. There's just horrors and shudderings, but they just come from her. Where Marianne is like, you know what? I think I should be shuddering right now. Shuddering is the emotion I need to really channel in my life. Why? Because that's what the ideal heroine would do. So on this point of being the ideal Gothic heroine, Fanny really check marks it off. Marianne doesn't check mark it off because even though she works on it, you're not supposed to work on it. It's supposed to come effortlessly and natural. So our last essential ingredient in the ideal Gothic heroine equation is to live in a world of imagination and mystery where reality is kind of questionable, honestly. So something really interesting about the mysteries of Udolpho is that it specializes in the explained supernatural, and that is where something looks supernatural. But lo and behold, there's a logical explanation behind it. This is exactly what Scooby-Doo is. Like whenever you're watching a Scooby-Doo episode, and it's like, wow, there's a monster in this lake. Wait, no, it's just a fisherman guy who got disgruntled and bought a monster outfit. Right? That's the explained supernatural. And it's just kind of funny because it's like, how logical is that ever? It's like, why did he buy the outfit? And in the mysteries of Udolpho, why is there a wax figure that looks like a dead body? So one thing is this destabilizes reality in the mysteries of Udolpho, and it also distracts the reader from awful things that are really happening. And it uses the foil effect. So in my video on what is Mary Bennet's purpose in life, I talk about foils, or how like if you have a character who's not that great, if you put a character right next to him that's like awful, the not that great character suddenly looks good, right? It's like compared to him, you seem awesome. Anyway, that's like the entire mysteries of Udolpho, where it's just like, wow, this forest is haunted. Wait, no, it's just an insane nun that breaks out of the monastery and plays music at night. Like, see how that makes it seem less bad when in reality it's like, you mean you have a nun who's killed people before running around at night? I don't think that's a great idea. And throughout the entire story, we're getting this message of like, wow, yeah, Emily might be living a really bad life, but it could be worse. It could be what she imagines. And we see this really reflected in Catherine's storyline, where she sort of struggles to establish reality with, did General Tilney kill his wife? Wait, no, he didn't. He's not that bad of a guy. Wait, he kicked me out in the middle of the night. So, I mean, he is kind of a bad guy, but he also didn't kill his wife. What is reality? So when it comes to being confused about what is real and what is not, Catherine is actually living up to being a heroine. So those are the 4 essential ingredients to being a Gothic heroine. 1, be aesthetic at all times. 2, understand that true beauty in nature lies in the rugged and the jagged and the decrepit. 3, have the feels, but like all of them all at once, not planned, very intense, also uncontrollable, but also don't work at it. It has to come natural. And 4, live in the Scooby-Doo reality. You never know what's real and what's not. And that is the way to be the perfect Gothic romantic heroine. But is that what Jane Austen was trying to tell us in Northanger Abbey? Was she trying to promote this ideal? Be like, young ladies, this is the way to be. Or was she calling into question the entire concept of what it means to be a heroine? And is that the issue she's really taking with the mysteries of Udolpho? Is the ideal that it's selling to young women? Well, let's look at that. So the very first line of Northanger Abbey reads, No one who had ever seen Catherine Morland in her infancy would have supposed her born to be a heroine. So Jane Austen's introducing this plot line, this main theme of her book, in the very first line of, we're talking about heroines and what it means to be a heroine. Does Catherine have it? Apparently no one thinks so. She's definitely not living up to these ideals. She's not from the ideal family. She's not from the ideal background. She does not have the ideal character traits. She doesn't have the ideal pursuits. She's just not a heroine. She's not heroine material. And Jane Austen really builds this theme throughout the entire book with constant references to these novels, these gothic romance novels, just like Mysteries of Udolpho. We see that Catherine should inspire instant passion in her lover, and she doesn't do that. Henry Tilney only starts liking her because she liked him. I have a whole video on how to attract Henry Tilney that talks about that. Also, she should return home a rich countess. She kind of fails to do that. And we see Catherine herself, the entire book, chasing the stream. She chases the aesthetic. She chases the drama. She wants to be a heroine because she reads about them. She compares herself to the girls in these books. Northanger Abbey is one long comparison between Catherine and the heroines of these books. And you have to think about, in an era before social media, this is who girls had to compare themselves to. They had to compare their lives to, their personalities to, and we do see so many of Jane Austen's heroines wanting to be like those girls. Whether it's Mary Ann judging her own emotional states, or Fanny being unhappy with the chapel, or Catherine just being like, I'm just not main heroine material. I'm failing at life. I can't even find a gothic castle for the life of me. The guy I liked didn't even like me back at first. What is happening? Why am I failing so badly? I think in many ways, Austen was calling out the unrealistic standards being set for women and how it really undermines how girls see themselves, that they think they're not good enough to be a heroine, that they need to have this lifestyle or this personality or these abilities. And I think she's just saying, wait, no. Catherine's still worthy of having a whole book about her, and her life is worthy. Like, look at all the fascinating, interesting, very real things that happened to her. Because these books could also undermine girls' happiness with their own lives, right? Like, my life is just not as exciting as these books I read about. There's a real lack of monsters and nuns and everything. There's a lack. But throughout the story, Austen points out that there's dangers and complexities in real life, whether it's figuring out that Isabella Thorpe is secretly not really your friend. Like, that is a danger that girls face in their real life. That is worthy of novels, and that is worthy of being important. And I think that's one of the reasons Austen's novels did so well, is that she put real girls in the heroine seat. And she had real things happen to them. For example, Emma makes a bunch of mistakes. We all make a bunch of mistakes. She's not perfect, and we're all not perfect. Meanwhile, Elizabeth likes Wickham. Like, what girl has not been like, oh, I like this guy and he's dumb? Like, that was a huge life mistake right there. And I think that she proved that anyone can be the heroine of their own story and that their own story was worthy. And I just find it so fascinating because this is an issue that a lot of people think of with like teen girls and social media, or really honestly anyone in social media. But they were facing the same issues back in Jane Austen's day too. And I think that was one of the main things that Austen wanted to address with Northanger Abbey as a response to the Mysteries of Udolpho. And so let me know in the comments down below, how do you stack up to being the ideal gothic heroine? And do you love Northanger Abbey? Do you think you like the Mysteries of Udolpho? So many questions I could ask here. And just a reminder, Brooklinen is currently having their sleep week sale with 20% off all of their items through March 20th. If you rely on Brooklinen for all your sleep needs like I do, I'd recommend getting the hardcore bundle, since that'll save you up to 40%, since it'll stack the bundle savings with the sale discount. Check out the link in the description below for more. And as always, guys, keep being awesome, because you're awesome. Bye!